The silent prisoner. The auction block felt colder than usual today. Lyra stood motionless, her violet skin dulled to the color of fading twilight after years without proper nutrition. Her four-fingered hands hung limply at her sides, the luminescent markings that once pulsed with life along her forearms now dim and barely visible. She had learned that stillness was safety. Movement invited attention. Attention brought pain. Next up, lot number 47, called the auctioneer, a bulky Gravidian with scaled skin and too many teeth. Crystalline humanoid, female, approximately 30 standard cycles. No vocal output recorded in 3 years. Minimal maintenance required. The crowd shifted with disinterest. Most buyers wanted workers who could follow complex instructions, or fighters for the underground arenas. A silent, emaciated alien with dull eyes wasn't worth much. Previous owners report potential telepathic capabilities, but neural suppression collar prevents verification, the auctioneer continued, tapping the metal band around Lyra's neck. Starting bid at 50 credits. Silence fell across the dingy warehouse. Lyra didn't bother looking up. After 6 years of being passed between owners, she'd stopped hoping for salvation. The universe had forgotten her people long before they were scattered across the galaxy as curiosities and slaves. 40 credits, the auctioneer tried, his voice edging toward annoyance. Come on, folks, the collar alone is worth 30. A voice spoke from the back of the crowd. I'll take her for 70. Heads turned. A human male stepped forward, his weathered face partly obscured by the hood of his dust-stained coat. He was older than most who frequented these auctions, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines etched around his eyes. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. 70. Sold to the human. Payment verified. As the man approached the platform, Lyra tensed imperceptibly. Humans were unpredictable. Some were crueler than others, finding creative ways to break what little remained of her spirit. He climbed the steps slowly, leaning slightly on a metal walking stick. When he reached her, he didn't grab the control lead attached to her collar as most buyers would. Instead, he studied her face with an intensity that made her want to retreat into herself further. My name is Dominic, he said quietly. Can you walk? Lyra gave a barely perceptible nod. Walking was permitted when instructed. Good. He reached toward her collar, and she flinched involuntarily, expecting pain. Instead, his fingers found the activation panel and pressed a sequence. The collar beeped once, then powered down to standby mode. The auctioneer frowned. Sir, I wouldn't recommend. I know what I'm doing, Dominic interrupted. To Lyra, he said, follow me if you wish. Or don't. Your choice. Choice. The word felt foreign, dangerous. Lyra hadn't made choices in years. She stood frozen as Dominic turned away, descending the platform steps without looking back. After a moment's hesitation, she followed. Not because she trusted him, trust had been beaten out of her long ago, but because the alternative was remaining at the auction house, where they'd simply sell her to someone else, likely someone worse. Outside, the binary suns of Kellner Station beat down mercilessly. Dominic led her through crowded streets toward the docking bays. Other beings gave them a wide berth, a human and his alien property, nothing unusual in the outer rim territories. They stopped before a small transport vessel, weathered but well-maintained. Not the luxury craft of a wealthy collector, nor the industrial hauler of a labor contractor. Something in between. This is the Mnemosyne, Dominic said, pressing his palm to the entry panel. The door hissed open. Named after the goddess of memory in Old Earth mythology. Lyra remained silent, eyes trained on the ground. New owners often tested new acquisitions, looking for disobedience to correct. She'd learned that silence was the safest response. Inside, the ship was cluttered but clean. Display cases lined the walls, filled with objects Lyra didn't recognize, fragments of stone tablets, ancient-looking texts, peculiar devices from a dozen different worlds. A collection of some kind. Dominic moved to the pilot's seat and began the launch sequence. There's water and food in the galley, he said without turning. Help yourself. We've got a 3-day journey ahead. Lyra didn't move. Traps often came disguised as kindness. Dominic sighed, a soft sound barely audible over the humming engines. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. I'm not like the others. She'd heard those words before. They always preceded new forms of pain. As the ship lifted off, Lyra remained standing, perfectly still, in the center of the cabin. Hours passed. Dominic didn't speak again, focused on navigating through the crowded space lanes around Kellner. Eventually, he set the autopilot and turned in his chair. You need to rest, he said. There's a cabin at the back. It has a lock, from the inside. When she didn't respond, he stood slowly, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. He walked to a small cabinet, withdrew a handheld device, and placed it on the table between them. This is the control key for your collar, he said. I'm leaving it here. You can take it or not. Your choice. Again that word, choice. Dominic retreated to his quarters, leaving Lyra alone in the main cabin. She stood for another hour, waiting for the trick, the trap. When nothing happened, she cautiously approached the table. The control key gleamed under the soft cabin lights. With trembling fingers, she reached for it, half expecting an alarm, a shock, something to punish her presumption. Nothing happened. The device was cool against her palm. She'd seen how they worked, a simple interface that could deactivate the collar completely or trigger its punishment protocols. Power over her own existence, handed to her without explanation. In her private thoughts, where even the neural suppressors couldn't reach, Lyra wondered why. No one gave without expecting something in return. What would this human demand from her? What new horror awaited at their destination? But for now, she was alone with a choice. The first she'd been given in years. She pressed the release sequence on the control key. The collar around her neck clicked, loosened, and fell to the floor with a dull thud. For the first time in 6 years, Lyra breathed freely. Trust in fragments. Days passed aboard the Mnemosyne in uneasy silence. Dominic rarely emerged from the cockpit, leaving Lyra to explore the ship's confines alone. The former captive moved like a ghost, her footsteps silent from years of practice. She slept in short bursts, always alert, always waiting for the illusion of freedom to shatter. The ship was unlike any she'd been held in before. Instead of prison cells or restraint stations, its walls were lined with display cases. Each contained fragments of history, pottery shards with faded markings, tattered scrolls protected behind preservation fields, stone tablets etched with scripts she didn't recognize. On the third day, Lyra found herself standing before a small case near the galley. Inside lay a curved piece of what appeared to be bone, inscribed with flowing symbols that made her heart stutter. She recognized them. The sacred script of her people, the Luminari. That's from the Cygnus Expanse, Dominic said quietly from behind her. She turned sharply, instinctively pressing herself against the wall. The human stood in the doorway, leaning on his walking stick, his expression unreadable. I found it in the ruins of a temple on Astrea 7, he continued as if he hadn't noticed her fear. Took me 3 years to realize it wasn't just decorative. It's part of a prayer cycle, isn't it? Lyra remained silent, but something shifted in her eyes, recognition, surprise. I've spent my life collecting these fragments, Dominic said, gesturing to the artifacts around them. Lost languages, forgotten rituals, cultural memories erased by conquest or catastrophe. He moved to a console and brought up a star chart. We're heading here, Vega Minor. It's a sanctuary moon. No governance, no registration requirements. He turned to face her directly. I'm not a trader or a collector of people, Lyra. Her head snapped up at the sound of her name, her real name, not the designation her captors had used. How did he know? Your markings, Dominic explained, seeing her confusion. They're distinct to the northern Luminari clans. I've studied your people's history for decades. He paused. What little of it survived the hegemony's purge? Lyra's fingers twitched at her sides. 6 years since anyone had spoken her name. 6 years of being called property, or subject, or nothing at all. Why? She finally whispered, her voice cracking from disuse. The single word felt like broken glass in her throat. Dominic seemed to understand the weight of that question. Why buy her? Why free her? Why know her people when the galaxy had worked so hard to forget them? Because erasure is the final victory of oppression, he said simply. Because your language, your culture, your very existence matters. He gestured toward the bone fragment. Because I've been trying to translate this prayer cycle for 15 years, and I've only deciphered half of it. Lyra stepped closer to the display case, her movements still cautious. It's not a prayer, she said softly. It's a memory song. For children. Dominic's eyes widened slightly. A lullaby? She nodded once. It tells of the first light, how the stars sang to wake our ancestors. Would you? Dominic hesitated. Would you be willing to translate it? Properly? Lyra studied him, searching for deception. Finding none, she asked, and then what? What do you want from me? Nothing, he replied. When we reach Vega Minor, you're free to go. There's a settlement of refugees there, some of your people among them. I can arrange transport, documentation. Lyra's breath caught. My people? Alive? Not many, Dominic admitted. But yes. Survivors. The ship hummed around them as Lyra processed this information. Freedom. Survivors. A future she'd stopped imagining years ago. Why would you help me? She asked, suspicion still threading through her words. Dominic moved to another display case and unlocked it. From inside, he withdrew a small holographic projector. When activated, it displayed an image of a younger Dominic standing beside a tall, slender Luminari woman with markings similar to Lyra's own. Her name was Talia, he said quietly. She was a linguist at the Universal Archive before the Purge. We worked together for 7 years, documenting endangered languages across the outer reaches. The hologram shifted, showing ruins, a massive library complex reduced to rubble, bodies partially covered by fallen debris. The hegemony attacked without warning, Dominic continued. They claimed the archive was hoarding forbidden knowledge. In reality, they wanted to eliminate cultural memory, make it easier to control conquered worlds if they had no history to rally around. He shut off the projector. I promised Talia I'd continue our work. That's what I've been doing for the past 20 years, finding the fragments, preserving what I can. Lyra's gaze moved from the now dark projector to the artifact cases surrounding them. Not trophies, she realized. Rescues. I'll help you translate, she said finally. But I want to learn what you know of my people. All of it. Dominic nodded. Of course. In the days that followed, they established a routine. Mornings were spent with the artifacts, Lyra translating inscriptions, correcting Dominic's previous attempts, explaining contexts and meanings lost to time. Afternoons, Dominic shared his knowledge of the scattered Luminari survivors, showing maps of settlements, names of living clans, fragments of their continuing traditions. Lyra began to speak more, her voice growing stronger. Her violet skin slowly regained some of its luminescence as proper nutrition and reduced stress allowed her body to heal. The markings along her arms occasionally flickered with faint light, a biological response tied to emotional states that had been suppressed for years. One evening, as they entered the orbit of Vega Minor, Dominic found Lyra in the ship's small observation dome, gazing at the stars. We'll dock in the morning, he said, joining her by the viewport. There's a Luminari elder in the settlement, Orin. He maintains a cultural archive of his own. He'll help you find your place. Lyra turned to him. And you? What will you do? Continue searching, Dominic replied. There are rumors of a hidden cache of luminary star maps in the Andromeda sector. Probably nothing, but worth investigating. A moment of silence passed between them. I could help, Lyra said carefully. With the translations. The searching. If you wanted. Dominic studied her face, surprised. The settlement would be safer. Among your own people. My people are scattered, she said. Our culture exists in fragments now. She gestured to the artifacts throughout the ship. Like these. Perhaps my place is helping to gather the pieces. It would be dangerous, Dominic warned. The hegemony still hunts for artifacts and those who preserve them. For the first time since he'd known her, Lyra smiled, a small, tentative thing, but genuine. I've survived danger before. As Vega Minor rotated below them, its gentle blue-green surface a promise of sanctuary, Dominic and Lyra stood side by side, no longer captor and captive, owner and owned, but two guardians of memory, preparing to face the galaxy together. The Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, continued her orbit, carrying within her hull not just fragments of forgotten worlds, but two souls finding purpose in piecing together what others had tried to break apart. Constellations of Courage. The settlement on Vega Minor sprawled across a verdant valley, nestled between twin mountain ranges that shimmered with crystalline deposits. Unlike the sterile stations or militarized outposts Lyra had known in captivity, this place pulsed with life. Dwellings of various designs clustered around a central plaza where a magnificent tree grew, its branches laden with bioluminescent fruits that glowed like captured stars. Dominic guided the Mnemosyne to a modest landing pad on the settlement's outskirts. As the engines powered down, he turned to Lyra. Are you certain about this? He asked. You could stay here, rebuild your life among your people. I wouldn't think less of you for choosing safety. Lyra stood taller now, her violet skin regaining its subtle luminescence over the weeks since her collar's removal. The markings along her arms occasionally flickered with light, emotions she no longer felt compelled to hide. My people are scattered, she replied, her voice steady. The greatest service I can offer them is to help recover what was stolen from us. She gestured toward the settlement visible through the viewport. They have found refuge, but I seek restoration. They disembarked together, drawing curious glances from settlers. Though most residents were human or near human, Lyra noticed several luminari among them, their characteristic violet skin and luminescent markings unmistakable. She faltered momentarily, overwhelmed by the sight of her kind living freely. A wizened luminari male approached, leaning on a staff carved with spiral patterns. His markings were elaborate, extending across his face in intricate whorls that spoke of high standing in the old hierarchy. Dominic Varin, the elder greeted, inclining his head. It has been many cycles. Elder Orin, Dominic replied with a respectful nod. Thank you for receiving us. Orin's gaze shifted to Lyra, his eyes widening slightly. A daughter of the northern clans, he murmured in the Luminari tongue, the words flowing like water. I had thought your lineage extinguished. Lyra responded in the same language, the syllables awkward after years of disuse but gaining fluency with each word. The light persists even in darkness, Elder. The traditional greeting seemed to please Orin. He beckoned them to follow him into the settlement. The Elder's dwelling served as both home and archive. Shelves lined every wall, holding tablets, scrolls, and artifacts salvaged from their homeworld. In the center stood a holographic projection system displaying a star map, with certain constellations highlighted in pulsing blue light. These mark confirmed luminary settlements, Orin explained, gesturing to the blue points. Small, hidden, but alive. He waved his hand, and red points appeared among the stars. These are rumored locations of our cultural repositories, libraries, temples, archives, sites the hegemony claims to have destroyed. But you believe otherwise, Dominic said. Orin nodded. Our ancestors were not fools. They knew how empires rise and fall. They prepared. He turned to a sealed container on a nearby shelf, opening it with a sequence of practiced motions. From within, he withdrew a crystalline disc, its surface etched with concentric rings of luminary script. This arrived last cycle from refugees fleeing the Perseus Arm, Orin said, handing the disc to Dominic. They claim it contains the coordinates to the Great Library of Ixora. Dominic examined the disc carefully. The Great Library was reported destroyed in the first wave of purges. What is seen is not always what is, Orin replied cryptically. Our people excelled at creating mirages. Lyra stepped forward, studying the disc. The script was ancient, formal, the kind used only for the most sacred texts. These aren't just coordinates, she said. It's a sequential key. A path through fold space. Dominic looked at her in surprise. You can read this dialect? My mother was a keeper of paths, Lyra explained, her voice softening with memory. She taught me the old notations before. She trailed off. Orin's eyes gleamed with interest. A keeper's daughter, he murmured. Perhaps it was not chance that brought you here. For 3 days, they remained in the settlement. Lyra spent hours with Orin, absorbing lost histories, relearning traditions that had been forbidden to her for years. Dominic met with other refugees, gathering information about hegemony movements and safe routes through contested space. On the 4th morning, they stood at the landing pad once more, supplies loaded, the crystalline disc secured in a specialized containment field. The path will be dangerous, Orin warned. The hegemony has increased patrols in the Perseus Arm. Their cultural purification division still hunts for our artifacts. Why are they so determined to erase us? Lyra asked. Our world is gone. Our people scattered. What threat do we pose? Memory is power, Dominic answered. Those who control the past control how others interpret the present. Orin nodded in agreement. And your people, child, were historians to the galaxy. The Luminari archived the crimes of empires alongside their achievements. Such honest memory is anathema to tyrants. The elder placed his hands on Lyra's shoulders, his markings glowing in blessing. Return when you can. Bring back what was lost. Their journey took them through the shadowed edges of civilized space. The Mnemosyne, unassuming and weathered, attracted little attention as they navigated asteroid fields and neglected jump gates. Lyra spent the transit time refining her translations of the disk, revealing a complex sequence of coordinates that would lead them through a series of abandoned fold gates, remnants of an ancient transportation network predating the hegemony's rise. If I'm interpreting this correctly, she said one evening, looking up from her work, the final gate will take us to a pocket dimension, a fold in spacetime created specifically to house the library. Dominic studied the projection of their route. The Luminari had this technology. The ability to create stable pocket dimensions. Not technology as you understand it, Lyra explained. Our scholars didn't separate science from what you might call mysticism. The ancient texts speak of singing rooms between stars, spaces that exist outside conventional reality. 3 weeks into their journey, disaster struck. A routine supply stop at a remote trading post coincided with an unscheduled hegemony patrol. The Mnemosyne was flagged for inspection. They're scanning for contraband artifacts, Dominic said grimly, watching the patrol vessel approach through the viewport. If they board us, they'll recognize me, Lyra finished. And the disc. Dominic's face hardened with resolve. Take the emergency pod. I've loaded the coordinates. You can reach the next waypoint while I deal with the patrol. No, Lyra said firmly. I'm not leaving you to face them alone. This is bigger than either of us, Dominic insisted. The library will remain hidden for millennia more if needed, she countered. But I won't abandon the only person who saw me when the rest of the galaxy looked away. Before Dominic could argue further, Lyra placed her hands on the ship's control panel. Her markings flared with intense light as she closed her eyes in concentration. "What are you doing?" Dominic asked, bewildered. "Something my mother taught me," Lyra whispered. "A keeper's last resort." The ship's systems responded to her touch, displays flickering with strange symbols. Outside, space itself seemed to waver, like heat rising from sun-baked stone. The approaching hegemony vessel slowed, its communication signals becoming erratic. Through the viewport, Dominic watched in astonishment as the patrol ship seemed to drift sideways, as if sliding into an invisible current. "They can't see us anymore," Lyra explained, her voice strained with effort. "I've shifted our position in the perceptual field, a mirage, like Elder Orin mentioned." The effort took its toll. As the patrol vessel eventually moved away, continuing its route as if the Mnemosyne had never existed, Lyra collapsed. Dominic caught her before she hit the floor. "I didn't know you could do that," he said softly, helping her to a seat. Lyra's skin had paled significantly, her markings dim. "Neither did I," she admitted. "Not really. I remembered the theory, but—" She managed a weak smile. "It seems some knowledge isn't just in books." 3 days later, they arrived at the coordinates indicated by the disk. Before them hung an ancient fold gate, its architecture unlike anything in current use, organic curves rather than angular mechanistic design, covered in what appeared to be dormant crystal formations. "How do we activate it?" Dominic wondered aloud, scanning the structure. Lyra stood from her station, approaching the viewport. "We sing to it," she said simply. The airlock sequence was nerve-wracking. Dominic insisted on going first, checking that the ancient gate's exterior platform was stable and its atmosphere containment field functional. When he signaled the all-clear, Lyra joined him. Standing before the massive gate, Lyra felt a connection to her past that transcended her years in captivity. She placed her hands on the crystal formations embedded in the gate's frame and began to sing. The melody wasn't like human music. It contained harmonics that seemed to vibrate between notes, tones that shifted like light through prisms. As she sang, the crystals responded, glowing with increasing brightness until the entire structure hummed with energy. The space within the gate's center shimmered, then parted like a curtain of liquid light, revealing not stars but a luminous corridor stretching beyond perception. "The path is open," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder. Together, they stepped through. The great library of Ixora defied conventional architecture. From the outside, it had appeared as nothing more than an asteroid floating in a pocket of folded spacetime. Inside, it expanded into a vast complex of interconnected chambers, each housing knowledge in different forms, crystalline data structures, living memory plants, light-encoded tablets that revealed different information depending on the angle of observation. "It's all here," Dominic whispered, moving reverently between shelves that stretched upward seemingly without end. "Everything the hegemony tried to destroy. Cultural histories, scientific discoveries, philosophical treatises." Lyra stood in the central chamber, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of her people and countless other civilizations they had archived. Tears tracked silently down her face, glowing faintly with the bioluminescence characteristic of her kind. "This is why they feared us," she said softly. "Not because we were warriors or held strategic resources, but because we remembered. For everyone." In the months that followed, they established a secure route between the library and Vega Minor. Small teams of scholars, luminari and allies from other cultures, began the monumental task of cataloging the library's contents and distributing copies to safe locations throughout the galaxy. Dominic and Lyra became the primary couriers, their unassuming vessel continuing to slip past hegemony patrols, carrying knowledge that would eventually undermine the Empire's campaign of cultural erasure. One evening, as they prepared for another run, Dominic found Lyra in the observation dome, her gaze fixed on distant stars. "Elder Orin sent a message," he said, joining her. "3 more Luminari clans have made contact with the settlement. They bring artifacts and memories once thought lost." Lyra smiled, her markings pulsing gently with joy. "The constellation grows. Are you ever tempted to stay? Dominic asked. At the settlement? Or the library? She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. I was silent for 6 years, she said. Not just my voice, my soul. I thought healing meant finding a quiet place to exist without pain. She gestured toward the stars. But true healing isn't in stillness. It's in purpose. Dominic nodded in understanding. And your purpose? To ensure no one else's voice is stolen, she replied. To make sure those who would erase cultures are themselves remembered for their crimes. She reached out, her hand finding his. And to honor those who see value in what others discard. As the Mnemosyne charted its course through the stars, Lyra gazed at the galaxy spread before them. Once, she had been cargo, bought and sold, her worth measured in credits. Now she was a courier of memory, her value beyond calculation. The neural suppressor collar that had once silenced her now resided in the great library, not as a tool of oppression, but as an artifact of history, a reminder of what had been overcome. And in the quiet moments between stars, when Dominic shared stories of his past and she recounted memories reclaimed from silence, Lyra understood the final truth of healing, that sometimes, freedom comes not when chains are broken, but when another sees you clearly enough to know you never needed them at all. In the vastness of space, aboard a ship named for memory, 2 wounded souls continued their journey, not just outward through the cosmos, but inward, toward completion. And the stars, bearing silent witness to their voyage, seemed to shine just a little brighter along their path. Retriclaude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.